This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, citizen-made radio.
Kia ora and welcome to Emergence News, recorded here at the Plains FM studios in Christchurch City, right here in the South Island of New Zealand, Aotearoa. We, and I'm talking about Peter, John and myself, Nigel, in the studio, we are Share International volunteers promoting the emergence of the next world teacher. His name is Maitreya. The arrival of Maitreya is expected and has been anticipated by many of the major religions, and certainly authors Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Krishnamurti, Helena Roerich and Benjamin Creme, just to name a few, have all produced volumes of work over the last 140 years, supporting the news that Maitreya is due to emerge openly, and he does not come alone. Many of the masters of wisdom will walk among us also. This, of course, is both exciting news and heralds a new era for humankind on Earth. In the latest edition of the Share International magazine, there are stories on a wonderful variety of subjects, such as how would JFK pursue peace in the Ukraine? A really interesting story on our history from the point of view of a student of the Ageless Wisdom teachings. There's a story on bringing faith and finance together, describing how world faiths are driving practical action for the sake of the planet. There's more on UFOs, and this is a topical story at the moment. As you might have noticed, stories coming out of America currently.
Yes.
Even on New Zealand news.
Oh, yes.
The government's under a bit more pressure, but they won't yield, will they?
It's like everybody's discovering something that's been obvious for thousands of years.
Yeah. I think we need to give this more due consideration.
Yeah, the story is they don't exist, but they're very dangerous anyway.
Yeah. They're a threat to national security.
But look, if they were a threat and if they were dangerous, don't you think we would have had some explosions by now? Don't you think that...
But they don't exist.
the arrogance of the only inhabited planet in the cosmos is our one.
Yeah.
It's bizarre when you think about it.
We're the only sentient life out there. Oh.
And there's also a story featuring Senator Bernie Sanders. He's denouncing the fact that 3 men are richer than 165 million people. And there's another story, this is quite interesting, part one of a story featuring the Iranian rising for women, life and freedom. Another one on market forces against the voice of the people, as in the case in France at the moment.
Yes.
And the UN providing us with a roadmap to cut plastic pollution by up to 80%. And that's just a snippet. That's
a snippet, Nigel.
That's a good word, that, isn't it?
It's a snippet.
It's just a snippet of what's in the magazine.
It's a fabulous
And there's
magazine.
all the usual features. There's Benjamin Creme answering questions.
From the grave.
From the grave, that's right. And there's a message from the master, and there's a few other regular features in there as well. So, joining me in the studio, you've already heard them talking about UFOs. John,
yes.
I was going to ask you before we turned the mic on. Are you fired up today? But I can tell you he is.
I had to run here. It's that cold, so I'm still huffing and
puffing. It's a good sou'wester out there in Christchurch today.
Man, it's taken the feathers off seagulls, I would say.
So, what are you going to look at in the magazine?
Well, it's been an interesting journey for me, Nigel. I started with...
What, to the studio?
In life in general. How did I get here today? It's been an interesting journey. I went to the article that you've covered off, How JFK Would Pursue Peace in Ukraine. And it's an article by Jeffrey D. Sachs. Sachs, I think is how we pronounce his name. We've spoken about him before around he's got an economic view of how to rearrange how we manage the planet. So I had a look at that, and he talks about a speech that JFK gave back in 1963. So I Googled the speech and I went to the JFK Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. That's where I've been today, Nigel, in Boston. And I've pulled the speech out.
He's full of surprises, Peter.
I've got the whole thing here.
We'll look forward to that. And Peter, what about yourself?
Yes, I'm going to look at this market forces against the voice of the people in France, particularly, and it's basically about the conflict between capitalism and socialism.
What is it? What is it about France? It's, you know, when you think about the French Revolution, you think about in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of unrest just beneath the surface.
Simmering, isn't it?
I'd like to... sorry, Peter.
Just simmering under the surface if it's not erupting already.
I'd like to know what personality and race structure France is.
They're uneven. Yeah, they're, I think, 3 and 5. Yeah.
3 and 5. Because there is something about France, about this continual push for freedom and liberty, and constantly squashed and rising up again and being squashed and rising up again.
They're very much a mental sort of nation.
Great scientists.
Yeah.
All right, so we've focused on the latest issue of Share International, which just arrived in our letterboxes last week, and it's the July-August issue. And both the guys are going to look at a couple of very interesting stories. And John, he's fired up, folks. He's coming up next.
Woohoo! All right, so I've been to the J.F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum today, and this article in Share International put me on to this speech. And in fact, what got me started was the Soviet leader at the time who was given the speech, Nikita Khrushchev, told Kennedy's envoy to Russia that it was the greatest speech by an American president since Franklin D. Roosevelt. And because of this speech, he wanted to pursue peace with Kennedy. So I went to this website and found the speech. Now, look, it's really long, so I've taken the liberty to trim it down and just pick up on some points.
Because it's quite dangerous talking about peace in America, isn't it? You know, you think about JFK, John Lennon, they both got knocked off.
Why do they kill their leaders? How many... I was thinking about it on the way here, and I don't know the number. How many American presidents have been assassinated and or attempted assassination? There's got to be 3 or 4.
Yes,
starting with Lincoln.
At least the
Kennedy,
Reagan,
Jackson. Was Ford... Was there an attempt on Ford's life? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
But anyway, there's been a couple. What is it about that nation? Oh, we don't know what you're saying. Bang. Anyway, here's JFK, and he's talking about Russia during the Cold War. And he says, he's talking at a university. I have, therefore, he says, chosen this time and place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds and the truth is too rarely perceived. Yet it is the most important topic on earth, world peace. He goes on to say, what kind of peace do I mean? What kind of peace do we seek? And I love this next paragraph. JFK goes on to say, not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I'm talking about genuine peace. The kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living. The kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. I cannot imagine Donald Trump or Joe Biden saying that. And not even in their private moments could they come up with that snapshot of humanity, right? Anyway, Peter, I was going to ask you, do you remember what point of evolution JFK was?
2.4.
2.4. So that's very high.
Oh, yes.
He's an elevated man. So let's shoot him. Let's kill him. Get him out. We don't want him.
Well, they got rid of his brother as well.
Oh, awful.
Yeah.
And he was about a 1.4 or 1.5. You know, so these guys, you know, these were talented guys. But you see, when you're talking about peace and you're talking about the light, that attracts...
Let's shoot Gandhi as well, shall we? Yeah. He's talking about some good stuff as well. Unbelievable. Anyway.
People get threatened, don't they?
Yeah. 2.4, Peter, you reckon?
Yeah, 2.4. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a highly evolved individual. If a 2.4 degree initiate walked into the room, you would sense that.
You'd feel it.
There'd be a presence there, right? Anyway, he goes on to speak. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. Total war makes no sense in an age where great powers can maintain large and relatively invulnerable nuclear forces and refuse to surrender without resource to those forces, as Putin is currently doing at the moment. Right? You push me too far, I'm going to push the button. JFK goes on to say, it makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age where the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn.
It's a great statement because he's talking about all the different elements on the planet, isn't he?
Right. And you know what? I say to my American friends, would Donald Trump be able to convey that idea? And if the answer's no, what are you doing? Okay, Kennedy. Today, the expenditure of billions of dollars every year in weapons acquired for the purpose of making sure we never need use them again is essential to keeping the peace. But surely the acquisition of such idle stockpiles, which can only destroy and never create, is not the only, much less the most efficient means of assuring peace. The US military budget this year has gone from $800 billion to $880 billion per year. That's every year. So next year, they'll spend the same. Who are they frightened of? They spend more money on armaments in America than the next 10 nations combined. So that's Russia and China and every other bad guy you can think of on the planet. Right? Who are they frightened of? Anyway.
And they just keep on pumping the money in it.
Oh, I'm fired up here, lads. I've got a little bit more to go.
Yeah, well, you were talking about, you feel the difference when you'd feel the difference of a 2.4 initiate walked into the room.
Right.
Peter and I certainly noticed when you walked into the room. It was like that sou'wester outside had suddenly kicked up a gear.
Yeah, the average point of evolution in the room went down when I walked in. All right, control. I'm going to breathe. Okay, so Kennedy goes on to say, I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary rational end of rational men. I realise that the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuer fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. And we are sold war still in this day and age as a glorification of what young people can go and do. We hold war and the weapons of war and the institutions of war in extremely high esteem on this planet. We are the planet of war, aren't we? It's just amazing how big war is on this planet as a topic.
Well, as Kennedy says, it's easy to fall into that trap of blaming a conflict only on the other side.
Yes, and he does that so well. In fact, I'm going to jump around a bit here, but he goes on to say it is useless to speak of world peace or world law or world disarmament, and that it is useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do, he says. I believe we can help them do that. But I also believe we must re-examine our own attitude as individuals and as a nation. For our attitude is as essential as theirs. And every graduate of this school, and he's talking to a university, every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace should begin by looking inward, by examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War and towards freedom and peace here at home. And I put that down to honesty. You know, when we talk about honesty, sincerity and detachment, what he's challenging the American people to say is, actually, stop pointing the finger at the bad guy over the fence who you've never met.
Have a look in the mirror.
Have a look in the mirror, right? So I'm going to cut this a bit short because I know we're short of time, but I just want to wrap up with JFK goes on to say, with such a peace, there will still be quarrels and conflicting interests. as there are within families and nations. World peace, like community peace, does not require that each man love his neighbour. It requires only that they live together in mutual tolerance, submitting their disputes to a just and peaceful settlement. And history teaches us that enmity between nations, as between individuals, do not last forever. However fixed our likes and dislikes may seem, the tide of time and events will often bring surprising changes in the relations between nations and neighbours. And I've gone to Maitreya here, and Maitreya talks about sharing. Share and save the planet. And he talks about sharing begets trust. Once you have trust, trust begets justice. Once you have justice, justice produces peace.
This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
Hey, look, thanks, John. That was fantastic. And JFK, he was certainly a man ahead of his time when you think about it.
Oh, so much.
You know, some of what you were just saying reminded me of the Dalai Lama when
Yes.
he visited us here in Christchurch.
Yep.
And somebody said to him, how are all the religions going to get on? And he said, in India, we all get on quite well. So it is, which is a demonstration that it is possible. Okay, Peter. It's a hard act to follow, especially with that storming start to the entry into the studio.
Fired up, sunshine.
Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nigel. Market Forces Against the Voice of the People by Luc Guillot. France, the country that gave us world liberty, equality and fraternity, will, with new social justice, emerge from its current struggles. Can France be a catalyst setting for an example to other nations? We've heard the raising of the retirement age to 64 is at the heart of the riots and struggles. But is it more about capitalism against socialism? Years ago, Benjamin Creme revealed, the Masters of Wisdom, that a fair rule for the future economy would be to have socialism at 70% and capitalism at 30%. In France today, the ratio is reversed, 85% capitalism, 15% socialism. In 2017, in a filmed interview, President Macron replied that raising retirement age was not on the agenda because half the working age people over 62 had no job. So there was no point. So why has he changed his mind? Or is it the market forces? In 2022, the Paris Stock Exchange distributed nearly 80 billion euros of dividends to shareholders. So how much more do they want?
Would you need a pension if he implemented a UBI?
Yes. Well, no, I think you might have a structured UBI, universal basic income, and it would be maybe thicker at the youth end and thicker at the older end, and maybe thinner through the potentially working years. But as we know, jobs are disappearing. Let's have that discussion. Jobs are disappearing. A, because we're making stuff we don't need and selling stuff we don't need, and B, because technology really is replacing so many roles. Nigel, you've got an electric car. Okay, you'll never need to go near a gas station.
Just to pump up the tyres.
Yeah, so I looked at an article in the local paper here some years ago, and it said the newest electric car that produced the same power as a 2-litre BMW engine. So the 2-litre BMW engine had over 2,000 moving parts. An electric engine has 20.
Yeah, that's right.
And all of those moving parts in a BMW engine have to be lubricated and kept balanced and kept all working together. So once you buy an electric car, that local garage with the mechanics that are fixing my 15-year-old Subaru, they're gone.
And the staff that are pumping the gas and
gone,
and running the shop, of course, the convenience shop, because that's actually where the petrol stations make their dough, isn't it?
Yeah, and you look at all of those, what are those shops that sell stuff for your car, Repco's and all of those companies. I don't need any of that from my electric car.
That's right.
Oh, car seat covers, maybe. a fluffy dice. I need fluffy dice, and I need a woolen steering wheel thing.
Oh, keep your handies warm in the frosty mornings.
So, yeah, we're going to be running out.
Keep it on topic, though, John.
Sorry, I got really carried away there.
So it looks like the politicians are managers for the corporations.
Yes.
While a new regime of policing the poor tightens the benefits, reduces time on unemployment benefit, whereas the battle against the tax avoidance and tax evasion in higher echelons is virtually taboo. Just hassle the poor. Macron had consultations with a group of experts on retirement reform, including the French director of BlackRock Investment Fund.
No way.
And his advice was rewarded with a Legion d'Honneur.
Oh.
So wonderful for him. BlackRock has assets of $10 trillion worldwide.
Yes. And I think it's the biggest investment company on the planet.
It is. It looks like the president is making the laws of bypassing the parliament. The masters have long said that the voice of the people is the way of the future, but the reactionary forces seem to bypass the democratic rules. Democracy is okay so long as it doesn't hamper the unlimited greed of market forces. The police forces are being misused by the politicians against their own people. And even quiet protests are escalated to riots by extreme behaviour on both sides. Both Benjamin Creme and Maitreya said, "We must march and protest to change the way we live." There's a little piece here that is very applicable to this article, A Time of Revelation by the Master through Benjamin Creme. For many years, the people of most countries have followed more or less meekly edicts of their legislators, their politicians. This has largely been the case where the legislative system was democratic or otherwise. This is now beginning to change. Far from quiet acceptance of unpopular laws, people in many countries will demonstrate and demand change. With the exception of those countries under tight military rule, the people more and more are demanding to be heard, to have their needs addressed and bad laws righted. As the beneficent energies of Aquarius gain in potency, this growing power of the people will multiply and become the most powerful voice on earth. So much is this the case, even now, that governments of all kinds are forced to take account of the people's reaction to laws which deeply concern their welfare. It becomes increasingly difficult for governments to govern along strictly factional lines. Much government action is secretive and obscure. Much is done behind the scenes, of which the people never hear. But generally, governments, at least in the so-called democratic world, are careful not to rouse the ire or discontent of the people.
All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org, and also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.